Joshua Smith here, and welcome to the GSD Mode Podcast. Now get shit done and smash that subscribe button now. What is up, my peeps? Joshua Smith here with another GSD Mode Podcast interview. Every single week, I interview top real estate professionals, top entrepreneurs, and just straight up top badasses that are out there dominating their space. And today, guys, got another amazing, epic, rock star guest here on the GSD Mode Podcast. Our guest today, Adam Hergenrother. Now, Adam is the founder and CEO of Adam Hergenrother Companies, which Adam has built over the last decade, the last 10 years, and he's built this into a $1 billion plus organization. So Adam got his first taste or start, if you will, in entrepreneurship and in business while he was in college by flipping cars, which that eventually over time led to a decision to jump into real estate and start a career in the real estate industry as a realtor, which boom, man, he created immediate success out of the gate, put 3 deals under contract in his first 30 days, and has been kicking ass and experiencing massive success since. Now, his success, Adam's success as a real estate agent, quickly led to him developing, creating, and becoming a highly successful team leader, which then quickly led to him becoming a brokerage owner. Now, if we fast forward today, Adam now owns multiple different brokerages, real estate brokerages, operates and runs many different expansion teams throughout the country, runs and operates a real estate investment firm, a real estate investment company, as well as a coaching and training company and other ventures that he just continues to grow and expand. And in this interview, Adam goes in depth, man, breaks down this 10-year journey that he's been on, the key things that really led to his successes, the adversity and the challenges that he had to overcome, the mistakes that he made, which are so important because we need to learn from those that have created success and learn not just what to do, but also what not to do so we can go out there and learn from those mistakes and also what they got right so we can create more and more success for ourselves. And Adam shares so much in this interview. I know you're going to get so much out of this. Now, real quick, before we jump in, if you haven't already, make sure to go snag my new book, Dominate Your Real Estate Business, Top Tips from a Top Producer. It's 100% free. There's nothing being sold, no BS, no upsells, no fluff inside this book. It's a digital copy that will be delivered to your email box within seconds. You can go snag your copy right now at joshuasmithfreebook.com, joshuasmithfreebook.com. And what this book is, it's 42 chapters. Each chapter is a different tip, strategy, method that I have personally implemented over my 15 plus year-long real estate career that have allowed me to become, these things have allowed me, these tips I'm sharing with you have allowed me to become not just one of the top realtors, but team leaders on the planet. Again, 100% free, nothing being sold. Go grab your copy right now at joshuasmithfreebook.com, and a digital copy will be emailed into your inbox within seconds. All right, let's jump on into this amazing GSD Mode Podcast interview with Adam. All right, Adam, welcome to the GSD Mode Podcast, my friend.
Hey, Joshua, thanks so much for being on here. And I just want to say thanks for all that you're doing. People don't realize how much energy and time it goes in to put these things on to get value out to all your audience and your listeners. So thanks I'm psyched to be on. But thanks again for all that you do and the time you put into it.
Yeah, no, it truly means a lot. Yeah. And just like all things, behind the scenes, it's tough to know the work that is involved and stuff like this until we go down that path. And
isn't that entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. It's just how it goes, man. And, but yeah, man, dude, again, man, so just honored and stoked to have you on. I mean, you're a dude that's created massive success in all aspects of really life, created massively successful businesses. You've been able to create amazing health, which I know we'll get into. It wasn't always that way. But you've been able to turn that around and maintain and continue that health journey at the same time, maintaining and creating amazing relationships with your family members, with your wife, with your kids. And, I'm always just really impressed and intrigued by people that are able to do it all because it's tough, man. And the biggest thing that I talk with highly successful entrepreneurs that are kicking ass in business is their struggle. Like they're great at business, but they don't know how to figure out the rest of life. Yeah. And it takes them to some dark places and it can be a hard journey if we're not intentional with it and do the right things. And, before we get into all that and what you're up to today, I'm always intrigued in our guest journeys that, led them here in the first place. Rewind the clocks, man. I mean, how did this entrepreneur journey start for you in the first place?
Yeah, thanks. That's all so true. I think for me, I think, everyone experiences dark times, or they have, each person has their hard. And for me, it happened early on in my life. And it's kind of important into my entrepreneurship journey, where for the first 16 years or so of my life, I was about 100 pounds overweight. When I got into about 7th and 8th grade, which seems so young now, and I can't believe I even was doing this, but I got into drugs, not like real bad drugs, but into it. And then as a freshman in high school, I was just kind of that role model student that you wanted your kid to hang out with. And so nobody really wanted me there. And, ultimately I came home one day and I just had this deep sense that there was more to life. I couldn't say it like I can now. I just had this orientation in my life that there was something more, that I was not going to live this impersonated life or try to lie to try to get people to feel like I wanted to do. And I was just very insecure, and I was using food as a fuel source to kind of distract me, if you will. And so I just stayed up all night and I cried, and I just kind of started using some sort of visualization of just, for me, that worked at that time. Just, I wanted something new in my life, and I had no idea what I was going to do. And the unknown was scary. I just knew that I was not going to live my life this way anymore. And so I ended up losing about 100 pounds that year. I ended up replacing all the people that I was hanging out with, because you know how important that is. And they actually ended up stealing all that I had. It's a really funny story. They stole all that I had within 2 weeks, and there was this, police were involved in this major issue. So here I am, like this 16-year-old freshman, or kind of going into my sophomore year, where I'd come in with a certain crowd. Now I'm kind of by myself, kind of experiencing this as a freshman, but it really taught me self-leadership. And it also taught me the ability that when you focus on yourself, you can do anything that you want, as long as you surround yourself with really great people. And so I ended up getting into sports, and that's where sports kind of took root with me, because it introduced me into a whole new concept around physical fitness, and also around just new people. And that was really inspiring to get around people that helped me. So kind of fast forward, I used that, and I ended up going to UVM, which is University of Vermont. And my grades as a freshman, and even a little bit in the sophomore, weren't strong enough. And I never really was great at school, period, in terms of test taking, that I had to do what's called a guaranteed admissions program, which is basically lets you in for a Vermonter, Joshua. And then as long as you get over 3.0 your first semester, they automatically enroll you. And so I worked just harder than everybody else did. Again, I ended up getting a 3.2 that first semester. And so they automatically enrolled me, and that was kind of a big point. But during that freshman year, I had a friend of mine that was in college, but not in college. Maybe some people out there had that one, who kind of lived in my dorm room like Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. And anyways, he was in the guaranteed admissions program, did not get in. Actually, is very successful now with his own businesses. But in that time, his father owned a car dealership. And he came to me about 3 or so kind of months into schooling. He said, "Hey, I had this opportunity, Adam, to buy basically a used broken car for $1,000. And I think I can fix it for about $500, and we can sell it and probably make $1,000 or so." And he's like, "Well," I said, "Well, what do you need from me?" He goes, "I need $500. And I maybe had like $600 or so in my bank account, right? I didn't have anything in there. He's like, "It'll still turn around quickly. We should be able to buy it, just do some cosmetic stuff to it, and then sell it." So I ended up giving him $500 out of the money that I had. And he went, did what he did, sold it. And we ended up making like $2,000 or $3,000, but it actually wasn't even the amount. What I learned in that moment was leverage. I learned that I never saw the car. I never went and held my money necessarily accountable to what I was spending it on. I gave it to an individual who made me a return and then gave it back to me. And then I just also learned over the next 6 months or so, we reinvested all of our profits into it. And I ended up accumulating close to $60,000 that year from just flipping cars. I also learned, which never seen a car too, I also learned about contracts, because the minute he had enough money, he didn't need me anymore either. That's a really pivotal point in my life, because it was really understanding that you can do a lot and accomplish a lot in business by using and partnering with really good people. And so that was kind of a turning point. And then I used that money to buy a piece of real estate. So I was still in college, living in my brother's basement, because I didn't really have a place, and we moved out of the dorms at this point. And instead of buying a house for myself, I actually ended up buying an investment property that I put down on as entering to my junior year of school. And then we ended up closing later on that junior year as a pre-construction unit. And we bought it for like 160. And then in 2000, I graduated in 2004. We rented it out, with my brother and I rented it out. And in 2005, I don't know anybody else that's actually had their note called, but we actually had our note called on it. It was, my name was on it because my brother already owned it. And the company, it was CTX Mortgage, which went out of business a couple years later. But they ended up calling my note. And it was really fascinating because here I am. I own this nice rental property. I'm living in a basement, still working, trying to accumulate money. And now they're calling this my note. But at the time I was thinking like, man, I paid 160 for this. It's now worth like 225. I'm like, this is just amazing. No wonder why everyone's in real estate. It's like the easiest thing in the world. You buy some real estate, it just goes up in value. And when they called my note, I got real kind of angry that like, look, they're making me sell this thing. It's just going up. And lo and behold, after I sold that, I sold it kind of like December, almost, this time into mid-December or so in 2005. And it ended up being, Joshua, the largest sale in that complex until 2014. So I also learned there that sometimes you don't know the whole outcome of things, but life is actually supporting you, not also fighting you. And so that's kind of how I got into it. Actually, what spurred that was I was a commercial underwriter. And I started seeing all these deals I was underwriting all these investment deals. And I would see these people making, $500,000, $100,000, $1 million in their tax returns. And then I'm like, wow, they must be like superheroes, right? And because I'm right out of school, I'm in early 20s. And then I would meet with these people, and probably like similar to all of us, you start meeting with them and you're going, this guy just made $1 million last year. Like, that's pretty incredible. And so it gave me the confidence to realize that I wanted to go out there and be an entrepreneur. And so I never really wanted anybody to put a limit on my thinking. And I couldn't say it at that time that it was. And so I ended up leaving after a little period of time there. And I got into real estate in 2006. And that's kind of started my entrepreneurship journey.
Love it, man. Such powerful stuff, dude. And then when you mentioned 2006, you pivoting and turning that focus into real estate and taking that on as a career. At that point, was it still more of the investment side of the focus, or had you gotten into also the realtor side of the business, the more,
Great question. I ended up buying about a property a year from the investment side. And I got into the brokerage side of real estate. When I say I left my job, people thought I was crazy too. It was like mid 2006. Even my family who supports me, they're like, you know what you're doing, Adam? I'm like, not really, but I know that I don't want to sit behind this desk anymore. And I tell you what it was, Joshua, I was doing this underwriting, and I would get a file on like Monday, and I had it done on like Tuesday, and I brought it to my manager, and she turned around and she goes, Adam, you're making the rest of us look bad. We give you this file. You need to make this last until the end of the week. And it was in that moment when she sent me back to my cubicle, and I probably had 50 cubicles in this open space, and I'm seeing everybody in there just miserable, like not because they're bad humans. They're just working in this dichotomy. That's just like, I'm just like, what are people doing here? And I'm like, I'm not going to live my life this way. And so I just said, I don't care how much money that I'm going to make. If I can just make 40 or 50 grand, I'm going to be super happy selling real estate. And when I ended up leaving the company, and the first 30 days, I put 3 homes under contract, not having an office, working out of a 400 square foot apartment, because that's all that I was in at the time. And I came into the first kind of brokerage office meeting that I was involved with, and people came up to me and they said, well, hey, Adam, what'd you do this month? And I thought I did something wrong. And they said, how'd you get 3 pendings in your first 30 days? And I said, well, is that not enough? And they're like, no, that's a lot. And I remember, and then the person asked me, said, well, what'd you do? And I said, well, I just got an appointment every single day, and I just worked long hours. I worked 12-hour days, basically 7 days a week. And I said, well, what did you do? And it was in that moment I realized that people just didn't bring the same work ethic that you and I bring into entrepreneurship. I wasn't smarter. I wasn't better. I wasn't more talented than anybody. I didn't have any more money. I borrowed $8,000 to start my first business. So I had a $8,000 loan going into this. I just set a goal, and I just said at that season of my life was going to be all about work. And so I made that my mission, and I just closed the gap on it as fast as I could.
Yep. Love it, dude. Such amazing stuff, man. And you're right. I mean, the unfortunately, those first, second, and third year are so tough for realtors. You know, we know the statistics of 90% of realtors dropping out in their first 3 years. And, you know, they whether it's they don't have the right work ethic, the right commitment, or they just don't have the right roadmap or the previous maybe sales experience. And so talking about, because it can be such a tough year. It also, we're in an industry where you kind of you get licensed and it's okay, good luck out there, you know, right? There's not always a lot of guidance and so forth. But I mean, that first year is so important, you know, right? Because number one, we need to survive it, to be able to stick in, to be able to develop enough momentum and give us time to go out there and create the success and so forth. And you talked about having 3 pendings in your first 30 days and really setting a goal of, okay, I got to set an appointment a day, you know. I'm curious what you did, and I know that really perked up the ears of a lot of our listeners. Like, what did your day look like? What were the things that you were doing to be able to lead to having not just such a great 30 days, but such a great first year?
You know, this was kind of the era before really internet leads. We're kind of dating myself a little bit back in 2006. Actually, though, do you remember Tiger Leads at all with Howard? Yep. Yeah. So yep. I think I was like Tiger Leads, like 9th client ever, right? And Howard and I actually ended up becoming good friends, and I ended up visiting him. But that came, I think, probably 2007 or so, maybe 2008 when that kind of introduced. So 2006 for me, I'll tell you, every Friday I'd have cupcakes that we'd either buy or make, and I would literally deliver them with my card to every for sale by owner. And so I would do that once or twice a week. I door knocked a lot. And then I just made as many phone calls as I possibly could to our sphere. And I just didn't stop. Like, I would just talk to them. I would talk to them, educate them about the market. People enjoy talking. And I would just ask them who do you know that's interested in buying or selling right now? I'm new into this. I'm really excited about this. You know, who do you know that's looking at this? And it's just really what it was. I just was out there doing it. And I just didn't stop. It was, people want to, and even in our own organization now, people want to know kind of like, hey, you know, I lead generate for 3 hours. And I said, well, great. Did you get your appointment or did you get your goal? And they said, well, no. And I'm like, then why are you celebrating that? Why are you stopping? If it's not a I did it for time thing. For me, it was all about getting the result. So I did whatever I had to do, and I worked my community. I worked my sphere as much as possible, from door knocking to my college, to my friends, to anybody that I could get in conversation with that I would. And when you orient yourself that way, there's just no stopping you. And again, that's why I said it was 10 to 12 hour days, 7 days a week. I would do open houses, 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday, just to be in front of people to do it. I also started downloading just scripts, and I would just practice scripts over and over and over again. I actually had a script notebook. I wish I could find it, that I would write down all of the most powerful scripts that I had that were there, that I would every day I'd write one out, and then I would go over to, you know, somebody else in my organization, and I would ask them about this script, and I would recite it to them. And I said, what'd you think? And I would just learn that script, so I got better at it. And so that's literally what my days looked like. It was learning for myself, practicing, learning new information so I could be better equipped to handle a seller or buyer objection. And then I just didn't stop until I got basically an appointment a day. And I didn't hit it all the time, but you stay focused on it, you hit it enough times.
Yep. No, I love that, dude. It's like, look, when I hear new agents that are struggling in that first year, I'm like, dude, if you do an open house every single day, 7 days a week, and if you're struggling, you have the time because you don't have a lot of clients and so forth. Even if you were the worst person at hosting an open house, right? Like you're not going to not have some success with it. No. Even if you're shitty at it, man, if you're doing the work every day, you're going to make something happen there. And I'm curious with, you know, starting this journey in 2006, I got into business in 2005 here in Phoenix, Arizona, and had, you know, a couple good traditional years before the market just pull the rug out from underneath all of us. And I'm curious how that impacted the way that you did business at that time when the market crash, kind of 2008, 2009 time hit, and what you did to be able to kind of pivot and shift to continue to create success even in that the worst real estate market in recorded history in our country.
Yeah. You know, what it was for me is I started hiring and getting a relationship with really good people. And so in 2006, in the first 90 days, I ended up making an assistant hire. And I didn't know what an assistant was. I just knew I'm kind of inherently lazy when it comes to anything that anybody else can do. If it's exercise or meditation or personal development, then then you have to own that, right? But when it comes to anything else in business that somebody else can do, that's why I go back to that story in college about giving the money and using the money and holding that accountable. And so for me, I started hiring an assistant. I think I went through like, honestly, 3 or 4 different assistants that year because I just made poor hires and different decisions that way. And then ultimately, I got into a relationship with a couple of really good buyer agents. And then I started learning. And you got to remember, 2006, 2007, 2008, people weren't talking about teams like they are now, right? I think the largest team at that time was maybe 50 million or so, 60 million. And so there wasn't really this whole form called teams. I just started bringing people into it because real estate is like a college basketball team, right? You always need freshmen, you always need sophomore, you always need juniors, you always need seniors in order to keep the championship going. But what you do need to do is you need to make sure you have a really strong core leadership that supports all of that. That's why when Duke won it in 2004 and they won it in 2008, all the players were different. However, the leadership was not. And so for me, it was about getting into a relationship with really good people, holding our standards high for what it was. At that time, it was a suit. We all showed up really early in the morning. We lead generated together. We put in the time together, and that worked well for our system. So when everything else was crashing, I literally just put blinders on and just said, I'm going to go after this, and I'm going to keep doing everything. It was almost like it was weird. I think back about this sometimes. It was almost as if I was waiting for like the sun to fall, or I was waiting for it to not happen, or I was waiting for real estate not to be there anymore. And then as long as I kept doing the actions and kept pivoting when I needed to that week or that month, the results would show up. And each year we grew more and more. And I think in 2009, I actually became the RE/MAX Associate of the Year for all of RE/MAX 3 years into the business, because I just put my head down and just blinded everybody else out there. And I wanted to prove to the world by surrounding myself by more intelligent individuals that anything was possible. And so that's ultimately how the approach that I took going into that.
Yep. Love it, man. So it sounds like for those first several years of your career, you're with RE/MAX. At what point, I know that you heard Gary Keller speak, you knew that making the transition to KW and ultimately over time investing and becoming your own brokerage and so forth, you went down that path. At what point in your career did that come about?
Yeah, two things happened. I think in 2008 or 9. So in late 2009 is when I opened up my first brokerage that I owned. In early 2009 or late 2000, it is the end of 2008. I think I had these financial goals in my life, and one of them I started hitting, and then I started looking for what else was there. And I also had this impression about the business that I really wanted to build was to build it through people and not through me. And everybody that I surrounded myself with was like, you can't do it that way. You have to work harder than everybody else. You've got to do the job better than everybody else does. And so I was listening to a lot of people around me, believing they were giving me the best advice because that was they had, but having this kind of conflict internally going, that's not how I see my business building and how I really want to run it. I want to run it through people. I want to build a business, right? I think we can prove to the world, at least in the iterations of my life, you prove to the world that you can do it. And then it's kind of like, I want to prove to the world or help other people do it inside my organization. And I went to a conversation, a private little mastermind with Gary, and I heard him say that. And it was the first person that ever kind of gave me permission to think the way that I thought. And I'm sure other people do that now, and they're wonderful teachers and speakers out there. But for me, that was the first time I heard that. And so as soon as I heard that, I said, how can I surround myself with that individual more? And that's ultimately what I ended up doing and opened that up in late 2009, we had the fastest launch in early 2010.
Yeah. And now I'm curious because now you're going from transitioning from, being a realtor, and then you're building out your team, hiring admin, hiring agents, and having a team, now transitioning into, in addition to that, being a brokerage owner. What were some of the big shifts that you had to make to create success with this new role that you have? And what were also some of the obstacles or the things that maybe you had to overcome that you weren't, didn't have awareness that you were going to face. And the reason I'm asking this is, there's a lot of people that reach out through the podcast and other circles that, are thinking about, they have a team, they're thinking about opening their own brokerage, and they're just trying to anticipate, number one, if it's the right move for them. And also, if so, what to be fully prepared for, and what it takes to go out there and create a successful brokerage as well.
Yeah. Well, the answer to both that is people and money. People and money are always going to be the greatest gift or the hardest thing that you're going to deal with. And so for me in 2010, when I realized that my life was going to be around leadership and about pouring into other people to build it, I made a focus to go out there and really build and invest a ton of education into myself. I think over the next 18 months, I spent almost $100,000 in training, from everything from Date with Destiny to NLP training to going down and spending with this source called the AVA, learning about behavior, about people for hiring them. And so I just literally just made my life, I tell this to people, if you want to go into leadership, and not necessarily the doing, then you have to have self-leadership, and you also have to be able to lead other people effectively. And so for me, that meant that over the next 18 months, and this hasn't stopped yet, but I really need to learn about how to effectively lead other people. And so that was the first change in my life, was I need to learn how to do that. And so I then went and got the coaches necessary to do that and started spending the money to invest in myself to do it. The biggest challenge with all of that is nothing happens as fast as you want it to. And I remember, when I started, I had staff, and there were so many more expenses than I anticipated happening too. Everything from copiers to just electric services to cleanings to all these things. And I ended up having to take money that I was doing from my commissions and putting money into the brokerage so that I could survive. And so I actually didn't end up taking a dividend out of that brokerage for the first 3 years, because I just kept putting money back into it and building up reserves until that it was to the point that I had. So for me, it was about, the first thing that I kind of changed and looked into is the rest of my life, I want to make around about people. I want to build about leadership, which is succeeding through others. And so what does that look like? And what does that mean for me? How do I orient my life that way? And then secondly, people and money were the two biggest things that showed up, were the biggest obstacles, meaning that I needed more money than I thought I did. I hired some people that I thought were great, ended up not being great. One of them ended up stealing like over $200,000 from me, is a whole other story. And then truly learning how to allow people to have freedom, but with enough accountability to ensure that you're getting the results and returning the dollars you're investing into them.
Yeah, love it, man. So on a personal level, when you've been faced with this adversity that these business ventures, have created or you've had to overcome, if you will, in your journey, and then also like with that 3 years that you talked about of not being able to pull out a paycheck because you're having to reinvest it all back into the growth of the organization and so forth. And I mean, that can be very, very difficult, very mentally defeating for a lot of people. And a lot of people might break under that type of pressure and not willing to make those sacrifices that you made that were necessary to take you to the next level. And, I'm curious, like, how do you personally get through those struggles and that adversity so you can make it out to the other side?
Yeah, in 2000, that's a great question. In 2009, I think I had this goal, Joshua, in my entire life, that once I hit about $500,000 in net income, that somehow the world was just going to come down and bow to me. Like somehow I was going to have a present underneath a Christmas tree that says you're amazing. And so up until that point, I was really money hungry, and I was driven by a lot of money to make it, to get this status or get this feeling that was supposed to come from money. And I remember my mom, who's the most unassuming person, I'm sitting down with her and I'm like, hey mom, I made like $500,000 this year. And she's like, oh, that's great. Pass the ketchup, right? It was like she didn't care. And in that moment, I realized that people just didn't care unless it affected them or how much you care about them. And so I actually got somewhat depressed during that time. And I said, this can't be about outwardly facing things anymore. And this has got to be, people talk about working out, right? You literally work out of side, you work on your body. I needed to go work inwardly. And I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that I needed to make a change in orientation in my life. And so then I started developing my own kind of inner work, which was business is nothing but this conduit for personal growth. It is literally, I mean, where else would anybody sign up for a lawsuit, or anybody else sign up to lose 50 grand in 1 month, or anybody else to sign up to have 3 people walk out on the same day? And so for me, I kind of oriented myself and said, I want to build a business personally so that I can use business as this opportunity to grow as much as I absolutely can. And so that's when I started. So when every challenge comes, I try to detach myself from the challenge itself and understand that life is unfolding for us, not to us. The world's been here for 4.5 billion years. We're down here for maybe 100 years. We don't hardly know anything. Life is going to unfold and it just does its thing, right? And as it does its thing, we just get to experience it all. And so it doesn't mean you become lackadaisical or you don't fight. But for me, I started not taking things so personally to begin with. And then as you do more inner work and more growth in there, you start to realize, wow, life can just unfold. And sure, yes, losing money feels different than making money. Hiring a really good a person feels different than losing a really good person. But they're all experiences at the end of the day. And so I think it's your starting position when you come into business that you need to be prepared to be able to manage the bad times and take full advantage of the good times. The first full Ironman that I ever did, my coach came to me and he said, Adam, there's about a 30% DNF rate, do not finish. And he said, it's not because people can't do it or they're not necessarily equipped to do it, even physically. They've been training for this. The reason why the majority of people fail in an Ironman is because they come into a full Ironman, which is a 2.4 mile swim, 112 miles on the bike, and then you run a marathon. And they had this impression that there's not going to be a bad moment, that it's going to be a great day. And he goes, man, you have a bad moment sitting on your couch on a Sunday afternoon, not less than an Ironman. So he said, what you have to understand is go into this knowing there's going to be some really hard stuff that happens. And you're going to have to figure out how to manage that, whatever technique you can do. And there's going to be some times that become really easy. They feel like they're great. And you have to take full advantage of those. And so it's the same parallel in business. When you embark to go on this journey of self-leadership and building a business, there's going to be some negative 2 days and there's going to be some positive 2 days. And the thing is, you have to learn how to manage both of them, because you can have a negative 2 day followed by a positive 2 day. And if you're overreacting on a positive 2 day, like, oh my God, life's amazing. I can make any decision. I can't make anything wrong. Life is just unfolding exactly how it is. The next day can be a negative 2 day. And you can feel like, oh shit, the whole world's collapsing and going to fall out, right? And so I think you have to understand that all of this is going to happen in leadership. And so if you're prepared for it, you just manage it. You use it as an opportunity to grow. Use it as an opportunity to learn. Use it as an opportunity to build resilience as you go forward. It's why lottery winners are in a worse off situation, because they didn't go through the emotional fitness that's required to be able to handle that type of money, how to handle that type of payroll, how to handle that type of employee. But as you build businesses in that first 5 to 7 years, you have to embrace the suck, because there's a lot of rebuilding of models, rebuilding of positions, rebuilding of systems. And each time that you do, you gain more. You learn to be able to withstand people yelling at you and withstand challenges. And so when all of these things show up, they show up and you go, awesome, here it is. How can we solve this? You can't fight reality. If people are like, well, that shouldn't have happened, I go, well, what's the point of even thinking about that? It already did. If it happened, it means it's supposed to happen. So now what can we do with it? Right? In poker, it's the people that win aren't the ones who get dealt full houses every time. It's the ones of how they play their cards. So life's not going to think about the hundreds of millions of people that are in this, even in the US alone, how many want it to be a different day out there, from the weather to the event. It's just going to unfold. So you have to learn how to embrace all of that and then use this to a defining moment to ultimately propel yourself into the next endeavor that you're forced to go into.
Yeah, man, it's such a powerful perspective. It's because no matter what, you're winning, right? It's either, hey, I'm experiencing happiness and bliss, or I'm experiencing growth. And growth really only comes from pain and suffering, but either way, life's good, right? When you use it from that teaching perspective. And I love that, man. So then you start, accelerating the growth of the organization. You're becoming a strong, great, amazing leader. Which continues to just fuel the growth of the organization and so forth. And then I'm curious, at what point did you start entering the coaching space? And also what led to that?
Yeah, I don't know thank you for saying I'm an amazing leader. I don't know at the time I was leading, I'll say that, and failing a lot. And I still am, right? I mean, I still show up to try to serve and contribute the best way that I possibly can to our employees and to our agents. But for me, so in 2010, I launched my first brokerage. In 2012, I launched BlackRock Construction, which we own and operate and develop over 1,000 units right now. I built that. We partner with REIT companies. So that's a big side. We have luxury division, residential investment arm. That's we started that in 2012 from some of that knowledge. And then in 2014 or late 2011, I launched Expansion. And then 2012 was BlackRock, I believe. And then 2013 or 14, we started getting into the coaching side of it. And at the beginning, it wasn't coaching, it was training. And so for me, it was going around the country and just training to anybody. In the beginning, I was paying, right? I would literally, not to the market, to like companies, but I'd pay my own way. I'd pay for my travel. I'd do all that stuff. I just realized that was, for me at that time, it was the greatest way for me to attract talent because nobody didn't care who I was and didn't know who I was. And so I literally would travel all over teaching. Is there anybody that would have an opportunity to, I would just go teach, right? I would drive to it or I'd fly to it, and every opportunity I would just take. And then you just get better, right? There were some times that were miserable, and there were some times that you did really well, and you just learned how to do that better. So that kind of entered that space for it. And then after Expansion kind of took off, and I ended up opening up I own a couple more market brokerages in other states now, and we kind of fast forward. We had an individual that was in my world for a couple of years who was really ultimately ready and poised to be the president of our coaching and training organization, which is Carrie. And so we moved her over into that a couple of years ago into that role, and it's just continued to take off. So that's kind of morphed into it, a lot of it, because it's something that we're really passionate about and something that we do a lot in our organizations, from all employees to agents, but also because we had demand. And I think people should wait for that before they really go into that arena. Whereas we started having people, can I coach with Carrie? Can I coach with Adam? Can I coach with somebody on your team because of the outward success that we're having? And so we kind of really stopped and reassessed what we wanted to do and how we wanted to be different and what was the message that we needed to have. Once we determined that, we found the person to go launch and build that out. And she was the perfect person to go do that. So that's kind of how that. Remember, success is not simultaneous, right? It's sequential. And so while I talked through that in about 2 minutes, there was, I spent $700,000 of my own money building BlackRock in the first year, right? To, investing heavily. And I got lucky some of these times. It could have very easily gone the other way, right? Sometimes you just don't realize it's not about all your decisions. There's some luck that goes along with that. So in those first 5 or 6 years, I was playing with fire. I was making big bets with, big outcomes either side. And fortunately for me, the chips kind of fell on that side, and now we're in a different position. But, those first 5 or 6 years of really 2010 to 2015 was investing a tremendous amount of money into people, into assets, into developments, into things that worked and didn't work. And again, you stop and you pause and you go, I'm doing this to grow. I'm doing this to grow the people in my world so that our world continues to be large enough that anybody can succeed at any level they want or have any opportunity inside our world that they want as well too.
Yeah. Awesome stuff, man. So powerful, dude. So, all right. So you're growing BlackRock, growing the coaching company. You're growing the brokerages, adding new locations. You mentioned that you got into Expansion and started growing Expansion. So I'm assuming on the Expansion side, that was more the on the team aspect. Is that correct?
Yeah. For me, I live in Vermont, which has more cows than people. And so when I literally started hitting and became the number one agent in a couple of years, there's a certain threshold, right? There's only so much money or opportunity I can give in my market size. I mean, I think our entire state, Joshua, you guys do this in like a half a day. And back in when I first started, probably did about 3,000 transactions in the entire year. Right. So it's like, and that's the whole state. I mean, granted, it's not big, but how many can you really do? And so I hit this, and then that's when Gary really started working with me. And he basically said, hey, there's this thing that I've been thinking about since the 90s called expansion. We called it duplication back then, by the way. And so I literally just duplicated what I had into another state. And learned from that whole thing. And the first 2 or 3 expansion teams that we launched were extremely profitable. They were great. I'm like, this is going to be amazing. And then it got real hard. It's like everybody that I had wasn't enough. The systems weren't there. I think the first location or 2 that you do is why I always tell anybody, if you're interested in expanding either to a city next to you or a state next to you or whatever that is, you either got to go 1 or 2, or you got to go all in. Because after 1 or 2, it gets so complicated. You can't take the same systems and models and people to do the exact same thing you want to do to get to 10. So really from basically 2 to 9 was reinvesting again of all of our profits into all new systems, really kind of pulling back the bow to be able to go further faster. So that went from about 2 to 9. And that took a lot. And we weren't really making a ton of money. We were making money from the locations and reinvesting it back into our expansion. And I had kept the local team separate, which was using those profits to invest back into expansion to kind of be able to do that. And that took a lot. And we learned, one of the big things that I learned through there was I didn't want people to use expansion in our world as a stepping stone, which a lot of people were like, hey, can I jump in here for a year or 2 and then I'll kind of go off. And we would invest and grow these teams up from, $50,000, $100,000 in profit to $500,000. And then they would just be like, thanks so much. And so we revamped our entire expansion of what that looks like. And we want to partner with people for life. And I know that's not, you can't obviously guarantee that, but we've changed a lot of our things and our process to do it that, we lead 51% culture, 49% profit. And we want to make sure we partner with people that believe in that same concept with us, 51% culture and then 49% profit. At the end of the day, people typically, they tip the scales with one or the other. And there's no right or wrong here. It's people tip the scales with money, which, those people that just, you make them money, and no matter how much money you make them, the conversation is always around money. And then, some people that are just all about culture, which is, you can be too far on that side too. You can be 95% culture and not do any activities that result in money. And that can't be good either. So for us, we got together. We didn't want to see a bring 20 in, lose 20 in a month. And so we went from like basically a 50% retention rate 3 or 4 years ago to having a 96% retention rate in our team. And we have almost 250 people in our organization now from the team side with a 96% retention rate all in 2020, which is the number that I'm more proud of for anything. I mean, we're over 4 million in net profit so far this year as an organization. And yet I'm more proud about our 96% retention rate because we partner with the right people. And it just, our ethos for that is that we always want to be the person as to why somebody else wants to come to work. And I think if everybody in organization can employ that, you end up creating a culture in an environment that can be challenging to create cultures with, because everyone is essentially kind of working for themselves as the contractors. But your employees, you can really build that up and you can provide systems and ecosystems. And from the onset is how can we use expansion in our systems, our models, our tools, and our ecosystems to allow real estate agents to become real estate business owners? And that's ultimately what our entire goal is with expansion, is to teach people actually how to build a business around this. And then that allows them to have job income and business income, and both of them hitting their goals that way.
Yep. Love it, dude. And you talked about, some of the obstacles that you had to face with the expansion team, taking longer, having to reinvest and reallocate. I don't want to say robbing Peter to pay Paul, but you're having to, take this, right, to grow that and expand that. And I get asked from a lot of agents that, are considering expansion. I think it can be lucrative and sexy, a sexy theory maybe in their mind, and so forth. But knowing what you know now, if an agent, let's just say a team leader or so forth, is looking at doing an expansion, what are some of the top things advice that you would give them to really prepare them to know if it's the right path for them, but then also to make sure that they're prepared to go out there and launch it in the right way and have success with it?
It's a great question for your audience. Thanks for asking that. The first thing that I would tell is your current location at a position where giving you the time and energy to actually go out and expand? Let me unpack that a little bit. For most people, most leaders are still heavily involved in production. And so they may have buyer agents and an admin, but most of those buyer agents and admin are maxed out to a certain extent. And I would venture to say you need to be in a position where you have a strong listing agent or two on your team that are somebody that's heavily doing listings in a buyer division too. That way you get a feel and a sense for what it's like to lead a listing agent and a buyer agent in an ops team. Then once you have that kind of packaged up and you understand what you're actually going to be expanding with, the mistake that people make is they go, I've got a great profitable business here and I'm going to lead with coaching. Well, that may sound really good and sexy to somebody that wants to come into your organization, but that will fail every time over time. Within 6 months, people will go, there's nothing really here for me to tap into. So therefore, I'm going to leave your expansion team. We went through it. Like it just happens. And so you have to figure out and go, okay, what am I expanding with? Is it open houses? Is it lead generation? Is it our CRM system? And then what's my culture for this? How are we going to glue this all together in a remote environment? And we started doing remote in 2011 when we launched. So it was different for us. We've been kind of on this trend for almost a decade. But how are you going to lead that way? How are you going to show up? How do you hold people accountable for that? How can you attract the level of talent that you need in the next location to be able to build it up? And there's two layers of kind of expansion. There's the model where you just take an agent that's 30 minutes away and you glue them to your home office. That's a different level of expansion. You still got to know what you're expanding with and how you're going to support them. But from a lot of the kind of sexy visual things that people are like, oh, I want to tell everybody that I expanded. They want to go put somebody in another state, or I love to travel to Florida, so I'm going to open up a team there, which is the stupidest thing you could ever do, right? Why, when you're traveling somewhere, would you want to work in the first place? But I get the rationale behind that. Anyways, so what you want to do is you want to figure out, what am I expanding with? What does my operations or admin team look like? Is it strong enough currently to be able to support? And I don't mean just support it, but figure out the new models that are going to have to go in place in order to be able to provide the value that I need to our agents. And then what value am I bringing? There is a coaching component to it. So their culture, your ops teams, what are you expanding with? And then what is your value to somebody for being part of your world? What are you going to get them? That can be wrapped up. And just like I tell everybody, it should be, just to give a listing presentation for a client, you should have a listing presentation for anybody that wants to expand with you. In fact, anybody that wants to be on your team, of seeing what they get for being part of your ecosystem. So that how do they change? Your job as building a real estate business should be making agents' life easier. So how do you do that? And if you start with that fundamental question and you can make their life easier, then people want to plug into your ecosystem because you handle it. From the beginning, we wanted to set up expansion so it was like a conveyor belt, right? It was when people say, well, how can you have people take listings that aren't really great listing specialists? And I say, because it doesn't matter, because the people that are servicing the listings are employees. Right. And so we have everything set up from transaction coordination as employees to listing managers as employees to marketing as employees. So the agent only has to be able to lead generate, get the listing and negotiate. Then they turn it over to our entire system that then handles the servicing of the transaction so that we can ensure that the transaction or the servicing is unified throughout the entire country. When you go into Starbucks in Seattle or into Starbucks in Florida, you go there in Florida because you expect the same experience. And so the thing in real estate is every agent of left accord is going to have a different experience. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong, you're going to have a different experience. But if you want to build a business that people can rely on, the experience has to be unified to a certain extent. So everything from what does your space look like to how do people dress to how do they show up to the culture of people you hire. And those are things that you set out for expansion. So number one is, are you trying to expand? Because the one reason why I see people really failing expansion because their current location is not profitable to the level they want. And they think by going to expand is going to be able to solve a problem that they haven't solved in their current location. Well, all you're going to do if you use that methodology is you're going to cause two problems and you're going to be suffering even more in your home location. And you're going to have to unwind everything. So don't ever think that expansion is going to solve the problem that you have. Expansion should be a natural byproduct because you're already kicking ass at your current location. And your next logical move is to expand. If that's not the reason why you're expanding, you shouldn't expand in the first place, because it's just going to end up causing you a lot more of a headache and frustration until you first solve the first issue, which is, let me solidify my current team so that I can run essentially without me, or me just leading it. So then I can use that to expand our next location by just as a natural byproduct, because people in our organization are pushing for expansion.
Yep. Love it, dude. And then I'm curious with when it comes to the staff side of it, like your listing coordinators, transaction coordinators, marketing, so forth, is that all in like one central hub in where you're at located in Vermont, or is that something that you hire on a local level per area that you're doing the expansion in?
Great question. In the beginning, I wanted the control of everything. To call it probably up until 2015 or 16, we had everybody built in Vermont. And then it became too much of a nightmare, just because the interaction, the laws and all that stuff. So we actually unwound that. Again, part of one of those fun things you go through. And we literally went out there and we call them operations coordinators. And so we have a staff in Vermont that supports all the other staff, right? And we have our marketing that supports all of our teams centralized. That's much easier to do. But every team has at least 1 to 3 employees on the ground that report to our staff in Vermont, if that makes sense. And they're being trained by them. All the marketing initiatives go out to the thing is, we would send a marketing initiative to like an agent or a CEO who's running the team. They wouldn't do anything with it, right? They would just, looks great. Thanks so much for sending us on. And then nothing would happen. And so we realized we needed somebody that's boots in the ground that was operationally minded to initiate and really put into play all of the initiatives that we were rolling out. And so that's why we put everybody on the ground. They have operations coordinators at minimum, and then they may have TC if they're large enough, and they may even have a director of operations there as well too. So then when we take things, we initiate it, we give them to people. The operations or employees are literally taking all the plans and making the agent's life easier, so they don't have to do any of that. They're the ones just receiving the benefit of it. So we're training them, we're hiring them. And then also people leave sometimes. So if we have a team where the OC is leaving for whatever reason, we have backup here that can step in and support that team, so they're never without an employee that's there as well too. So to answer a long question, we've done it both ways. I would highly recommend making sure that you have, especially if you're jumping states or far enough away, that it's not easy to just drive to every day, then I would definitely put an operations coordinator or some sort of employee there that's really handling TCLM on a local level, that understands it, and get them licensed as well.
Yep. Love it, dude. So then I'm curious when it comes to leadership, and this, probably ties into culture as well. But I mean, there's only one of you. You can only be in one place at a time, personally, physically. And you've got the brokerages, the expansion teams, you've got the BlackRock, investment on the construction side, you've got the coaching and training company. And look, it can be one thing where when you're there present every single day at the same company, it's one location, and just your energy can help drive it and so forth. But as you expand and grow, and people aren't able to experience you personally every single day, it can be harder and harder to keep that same leadership and that same culture inside the organization. And what have you found to be the key most important things to allow that to stay really strong, even though you can't physically be in all these places or work with everybody on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah. I've only ever been to 2 of my locations ever, to put it in perspective that way. So and that's not positive or negative. That's just showing that it can be done if you're sitting there thinking that you need to be in the other location. That's why I always go back to, first thing is can you be a little absent in your current location to learn what that feels like first, right? And then you can open up your next location. But for me, it started with making sure that we're also partnering with people who really want to be part of our culture. And our culture, Joshua, we are a culture of model following and execution. And so we want to partner with people who follow models and follow systems and execute on those. We don't want entrepreneurial people jumping in here thinking they can do it differently because it's a different market or different people. We want to partner with people that are willing to come in there and saying, whatever I've done in the past, I'm going to throw away, and I'm going to take basically business building in a box, and I'm going to follow it to a T. So we're very particular about following it. And if people funny, if they follow a model and a system, right, for anything, fitness, health, or business that we've spent millions of dollars over a decade creating, they will be successful. And so the thing is, the more people fight the model, the less success they have. But when people buy into a model, because that's why I tell people, like, you're partnering with us for our ecosystem and our model. Follow it. And so when they follow it, they start seeing the results, which gives them a virtuous cycle that they can follow into. Then what we've developed over time is, how do we pull these people into our culture? So we have what's called Herg offers, which is people in our organization can pull money together, and we have our investment firm takes care of that, our investment side from BlackRock. We go out and buy real estate properties, we flip them up and sell them, giving returns to all of our agents that wanted to invest in those particular deals. We do a power-up call for 10 minutes every day, Monday through Thursday. That I do the one on Monday, which kind of sets the tone for a leadership message, if you will. And then a different CEO or different employee will do one, for a quarter, Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday. I always do them one day. So we have different connecting. We also have what's called boot camp, and boot camp runs once a month. It's 2 weeks long. It pulls everyone together. There's high level of accountability, pulls everyone from the whole country into it. And then we do a 1 hour CEO call for all of our CEOs and their employees that are there to come on, which I do about a 40-minute training or so. And then our team provides regular updates for that. But it's also just a ton of communication the best way that you can. You don't have to be physically in there, but you have to communicate your models and your systems. And then we do, we have a podcast. We wrote a book. I write an article every week for Inman as a contributor. We also have 2 other emails that go out every single week to different audiences. So whenever I'm writing content, by the way, I'm writing it as if my people are the only people reading it. And I think people miss that step. Like, even when I'm talking with you in a podcast, I'm talking as if I was talking to a CEO and what they need to do. And hopefully that's valuable to other people. When they listen to this, they're getting more ingrained in your culture. And so just think about through those things when you're building your culture, about every time you get the opportunity to speak, you talk as if you're going to teach to your people in your current organization so they hear that differently. And then just find your venue or your mode for being able to distribute that. And it's also, again, it goes back to, if you have somebody, though, that's really accountable, that wants to be part of your ecosystem, that's plugging into what you're doing, they're going to take your energy, your systems, your models, and then deliver that to everybody that's out there, while them also getting the flavoring from any way that you can deliver that without being physically in their space.
Yeah. Yep. Love it, man. So on a personal front, I'm curious, for you personally, man, because it's you got a lot going on, dude. Doing the separate business ventures, plus you got young kids, you're married, plus you're out there competing in Ironmans and doing all this crazy, health stuff. How do you keep it all together where you're not dropping some of those, important elements of life and keeping it all, balanced, if you will, where you're able to get it all done?
Yeah. Well, it's GSD mode, right? It's literally, if people started measuring their day in minutes instead of measuring their day in weeks, they would be so much more intent on how they actually showed up for work. And I'm sure you see this too. Many people have reached out to you. Most people just think that they're actually being productive, but they're not. They're doing things that feel good, but they're not moving the needle. It's like, take the day before you go on vacation. It's like people get so much done the day before vacation because they almost have like this badge to be an asshole for them to be able to GSD, right? To be able to say, I can't do that. I'm going on vacation tomorrow. I hope you understand. So you start saying no to a whole bunch of things. And so for me, I got very clear on several things in my life. One, that I wanted to play every day. One, that I wanted to learn every day. And number 2, I wanted to work every day. And number 3, I wanted to work every day. Most people see these in big boxes of decades, like you learn for the first 18 years of your life. Once you're done learning, Joshua, you move into this work phase of the next 20, 30 years of my life. I'm going to work, and I can't wait to get that $1,200 a month pension when I'm done out of this, right? And then someday I'm going to play. And so when you realize you're going to die soon, nobody knows when that's going to be. It's a very short period of time you're here. I just decided that I'm going to play, live, and work every day. And so I decided of how many hours I'm willing to dedicate to each thing each day. And so I got really just disciplined with my life when it comes to those things. So for me, I start around 4 to 4:30 every morning. I do about 90 minutes of personal development. I exercise for an hour or two, depending on the day. I spend about 30 minutes with my family in the morning. I go to work. I work in bursts. I work from 8:30 until 11:30. From 11:30 to 1 is blocked off Monday through Thursday in my calendar. Nothing goes in there. I meditate again during that time. I eat. I check some emails. And then I work again from bursts from 1 to about 4 o'clock, 4:30 sometimes. And then when I'm done that, I go home and there's nothing that goes in that time period. I'll come back to what do you do if you can't do that every time. But for me, I got structured there. That happens. I also structure my day in really big bursts. So that the burst, but really impactful. So Monday and Tuesday, I may have 14 appointments on Tuesday. I may have 10 appointments on Monday, but I'd much rather have very long days, Monday and Tuesday with very little time in there, have my content day on Wednesday, and then I'm done on Thursday structurally at 1 o'clock every week. So then Thursday at 1, I'm done through the weekend. Doesn't mean I don't work. It just means that there's nothing that goes in there unless I absolutely need to put it in there. So I'm very structured with this. I actually learned this during when I was doing Ironman training, when I had to go train for a Friday for 8 hours. And I started canceling my Fridays, and I started moving everything up in my calendar to front load everything. And then I just got this aha, Joshua, that I'm like, why can't I do that with everything? Why can't I say no to 50% of the meetings that I'm in anyways? I'm only in them to make myself feel significant. Nobody even cares what I have to say in here because they're better at it than I am. And so I think a lot of us are in these meetings just to make it feel like we're contributing, because there's this whole fraud syndrome that leaders can have. And it happens to all of us, the imposter or fraud syndrome, that you need to be in a meeting or need to be contributing to make it to feel like people need to be around you. Well, I just realized I was the one in the way. And so I actually condensed to what people really need me for. If it's a sports team, everyone has a role. So what is my role, and how do I solve that role in the first couple of days so I can build my calendar to do these different things? And so I just got very, very disciplined on my calendar and on my time and what I was willing to do. And I always go back to this question: if more time is being required of me. Now I get it. There's weeks that sometimes require that, or days. I'm talking about generally speaking. If I was involved and I started being pulled into something, I would pause and go, do I have the right people here, or do I need to hire somebody? Because for me, I'd rather invest into a person to get a return on them and my time back. And that's just how I've always been from the beginning. So I'd much rather just go hire somebody, right, when you can afford it, to go out and hire them to take over parts of your job, and you start slithering that away. So that's how I've set up my life, and I just hold it there. You know, Ela Cupid, who broke the 2-hour marathon record, which, by the way, a 2-hour half marathon is pretty respectable. This dude, I'm sure you've seen it. Like, he broke a 2-hour marathon. That's incredible, right? It's like it's more powerful than almost a 4-minute mile. But anyways, one of his favorite quotes that he said when he first broke it, he said, "Only the disciplined ones in life are free. Everybody else is a slave to your moods and your passions." Which means that when you're a slave to your moods, it's like, do you feel like lead generating today? Not really, I'm not going to do it. Do you feel like leading today? Well, not really need to do that today. I'll do it tomorrow. Instead of putting a calendar together that actually dictates your actions and your habits, not some calendar that looks sexy that you never follow, a calendar that you're actually going to follow so you can build habits for life. And as you build habits for life, they become a staple and orient the direction of what actions you take, which then produce the results that you're looking for. And so people need to go back and look at, am I saying yes to the right things? Am I saying yes to the $100,000 property instead of saying no to that, so I can concentrate on getting a $400,000 property, so I get more with my time? At some point in your life, entrepreneurs have to make this decision of they have to start saying no to something in order to say yes to the next opportunity that shows up that's a higher return based on their time. And think about it this way, we've all heard of the Pareto principle, or most of us have. If you haven't, it basically just says 20% of your results produce 20% of your time, produce 80% of your results. Joshua, I think people are operating the opposite, where 80% of your time is producing 20% of your results. And to give you the audience a little tactical thing to take home from here, go back. If you work 50 hours a week, and it took 20% of those 50 hours, which is 10 hours a week, is 10 hours producing 80% of your results? And if the answer is even yes, what are you doing with the other 40 hours? Why do you need to be on those other 40 hours? And when I started looking at this in my own life, most of that I was just on because I needed to feel good. And so then I can just condense that all down. So take that away of how many hours a week are you working, or is 20% of that producing 80% of your results? because then you can learn to say no to the other things that are taking a bunch of your time. This even goes into leadership. When you're leading other people, right? Are you pouring into your top 20% that are producing 80% of the income for your business? Or are you pouring into the bottom 80% because you think the 20% are good? Most people are spending all of their time in the lower 80%, knowing that they don't even want to be saved in the first place, or that they're just happy doing what they're doing. And so we have to get very clear in leadership about the direction that we're going to take and how we're going to use our time. But because in order to have GSD mode, right, in order to have that level of intensity, you've got to be super clear on how you're spending your day. And everyone needs to measure their day in minutes.
Yep. Love it, dude. Love it, man. So powerful, dude. I'm curious as well with your scheduling, with having multiple different business ventures like you do, sometimes, I'm involved in multiple companies as well. And sometimes the issue that I'll have is, just that think time, right, where it's kind of tough to shut off my mind here to focus then on this other business and so forth. And I'm curious, do you have it where maybe specific days, I know you talked about like Wednesday being content creation time. Do you have it like, okay, hey, Mondays I'm going to spend on this business, Tuesdays on this business, or have a certain time block within those days where you can give that full focus and not dilute that kind of critical think time being absorbed by, something else?
Great question. Mondays are individual meetings with my leaders. Tuesdays are company meetings. That's kind of how I've structured my day. But in the beginning, I spent about 30 minutes. I spent about 90 minutes in the personal development, 20 minutes of meditation, and then about 60 minutes of journaling. I journal for each one of my kids just because, when your kids are young, I use what's called Evernote. And this is answering your question, but it's kind of a cool little hack if you have kids. I use Evernote and I take a lot of photos of my kids almost every day. Just something that they're doing small, not even worth picture worthy, but just something that I then the next morning when I'm doing their journal, I have a journal of their entire life since they were born, all of them. And I pull in photos and I try to journal about something that's different about that they said or did that you won't remember. You always think like, oh, I can't wait to tell you about that. But you can't remember those things or what specific days they were or what they said. So the next morning I journal about what Asher or Sienna or Maddie said, about what they did or what they're really eating right now and what they like and how they do it. I pull in photos from that. So I have this cool journal that is just a stage and an arc of their entire life. And then I have one for my wife. That's something that I'm grateful for her. That's different every day. And some days are difficult, right, to find those things. But it always puts me in the position that I don't want her to wake up and me bringing negative energy into our relationship. I want to be open. And then the last one is the Adam's life is what it's called. And it's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And it's really just where my thinking, where does my focus need to go? It's basically where I kind of write out sometimes each organization or what's really been tripping me up. Why am I getting disturbed by this, right? Why am I allowing this to affect me? Or what is really money? Money is a tool. And then so that to me is my critical thinking time. If for whatever I need to get out that's in my mind onto paper, so it gives me direction and focus. And then I take that and I start distributing that to certain leaders so they have direction from me. So I take the time each morning. It's built into my calendar. I just don't miss this time to critically think every day. Now, you know what the best thing about this is? If you have a really strong morning routine, you can get very undisciplined later on in the afternoon, knowing the next day it'll snap you back into it. What I see with people is they get undisciplined and then they're like, oh, I'll start it again. And then they haven't built a habit in the morning. And then another day goes by, and now they're just so far out of the habit. So if you know that you can use this morning every time to snap back into it, you'll never really go more than 24 hours without being undisciplined or out that critical thinking time. I also, as you probably heard, I stopped my week on Thursday at 1:00. So from 1:00 on is also critical thinking time. It doesn't mean I may be skiing or exercising or doing something, but I'm also thinking during that time. I read a book or two during that time. I listen to a ton of podcasts during that time. If you want to be able to deliver more output to your employees or to your agents, you need more input. So that's a lot of my input time as well too. So I consume a lot of data during that time. And I heard that from one of my mentors. He goes, Adam, at some point in time in your leadership journey, you're just going to have to take a day and read, or at this point, listen to Audible or a podcast or whatever it is that you're doing. And so that's just became the theme of it. So that leaks into the weekend. I use that as inspiration for my critical thinking time in the morning. So I'm always prepared. We have a lot of content that we deliver every week. And so the week before, I'm developing it from input and through my critical thinking time or my writing, my journaling time. that then creates the content that then becomes the theme for the next week. So that it may be the same principle, but how I say it changes. So our people are hearing it differently. So that's kind of how I structure my life. It forces input, it forces critical thinking time, and it forces self-leadership to be able to hold the line on those things. And also the last one, it forces self-mastery, which self-mastery, Joshua, is just overcoming that voice inside your head that says no. And when you could master that with using your self-mastery, then you're always in this position to be able to add value or add input to everyone that's around you.
Yeah, love it. Such amazing stuff, man. So I got one last question for you here. I know we're going long on time, but before I get into this last question, for those that are here with us that are watching and listening, if they want to continue following you on this amazing success journey that you're on, if they want to check out your amazing podcast, the content that you're pushing out and creating out there, we got realtors from all over the country that are watching and listening to this as well. Maybe they want to reach out and have a conversation with you about joining one of your amazing expansion teams or one of your brokerages, or maybe they're wanting some additional coaching and training from you. Like, where are the best places to go do all of that at?
Yeah. You can go to adamhergenrother.com, adamhergenrother.com. It'll link you up to everything. Or you can go to, it's Business Meets Spirituality for our podcast, but adamhergenrother.com will link you to our coaching, to our expansion. Super easy to reach out that way. And I love and welcome any insights or comments that people have from this or questions that they have, and I'd love to answer them for them.
Yep. Awesome. And those that are watching and listening, wherever you're at, whether it's YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, Spotify, wherever you're at, if you just scroll below, we'll have all of those links right below to make it super easy on you guys. All right, so just one last question for you, Adam. If Adam today, knowing everything you know now today, everything that you've learned through this whole entire amazing journey, if you could go back and have a conversation with your younger self when you first entered this industry, when you first entered this journey, and give yourself two pieces of advice that you feel would have really just fast forwarded this success trajectory that you're on, what would those two pieces of advice look like?
Number one, I wouldn't have spent money recklessly when I was first starting off. I didn't, you don't need the $150,000 car. You don't necessarily need the big house. At time, those will come, but you need to only when it's just super easy for you to be able to afford. I was spending money when I should have invested into people, which goes into number two, which I would have invested into a higher level talent early on in my life. What I mean by that is I stopped at some point and I said, I wonder how many people Jeff Bezos has around him that make 50 grand. I wonder how many people, Steve Jobs, because, whatever is the time was, I wonder how many people around him make $40,000 or Mark Zuckerberg. And the answer is none of them. They're all making millions of dollars. And so if you want that level of talent, like Tom Brady isn't making $5,000, right? Like you want that level of talent, you've got to be willing to use your checkbook as a weapon. And it starts with number one, being on a frugal financial, physical environment for yourself, which then gives you the ample ability to invest into people that are probably going to be making more money than you in the beginning, but you're hiring them because of what they're going to do to accelerate your business. And so those are the first two things that I'd go back and have that conversation with is one, saving better money really early on in my life. And then number two, investing in making the jump in brackets is what I refer to it. It's like that 30 to 50 grand, 50 to 75. I would get into that $100,000 plus bracket as fast as I absolutely could, and then hold my money highly accountable. I find this too is the higher, when people make like a $40,000 or $50,000 higher, they kind of expect certain results. Like hey, it's something in a tier, but that's okay because they didn't do those things. But when you go invest into a $100,000 person, you have this different expectation. You don't tolerate the same thing. At least I didn't. It's like if you buy a Ferrari and it doesn't go 0 to 60 in 4 seconds or less, you're probably going to return it, right? And so you just have a different expectation and a different level of leadership. And what it also does is it forces you to be another higher lid for that person. So it forces you to grow more. So all of those components kind of shaped up into it, spend less, get myself on a budget, and invest into a higher level of talent by jumping brackets.
Yep. So such powerful words, man. And Adam, I know how busy you are, and the fact that you took time and you're busy to be here with us and share all your amazing knowledge and your experience with us, man, truly means a lot. And this has been a huge honor, dude.
It's an honor to be on you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yep, 100%. Those watching and listening, as always, we truly appreciate you being here. Truly appreciate all your support. Keep up the amazing work. Keep kicking ass, and we will see you next time. Peace. I hope you enjoyed this GSD Mode podcast episode. Now make sure you get shit done and smash that subscribe button now.